Salem Carter carried his old backpack up the broken steps to the small apartment he shared with his mom and little brother. He was really tired. His body hurt from carrying his heavy school books and all the worries about his family. It had been more than a year since his dad had died suddenly, but the sadness and problems hadn't gone away. When Kalen opened the door, the smell of dinner welcomed him. It wasn't a big meal, just some rice and canned vegetables that his mom had cooked, but it felt like home. Kalen smiled as he walked in, even though he was so tired. "Hey, Kalen, you're late again," said Dorian, his 14-year-old brother, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. "I thought your shift ended early today," Dorian added. "I got busy," Salen replied, putting his bag down. "How's your homework going, Eli?" "Almost done," Dorian said proudly. "This math stuff is easy." Their mom, Marceline, came out of the tiny kitchen. She looked tired, and her hands were shaking a little. Her skin looked pale, too. "Ma, are you okay?" Seelan asked, stepping closer to her. "I'm fine, baby," she said with a weak smile. "Just a little tired. Don't worry about me." Seelan didn't argue, but he was really worried. His mom had diabetes, and her health was getting worse. Since his dad passed away, things had been hard. The medical bills kept growing, and they couldn't afford the treatments she needed. But Marceline always tried to act strong, even when Kalen could see she wasn't feeling well. The three of them sat down to eat. Their small kitchen was filled with the sound of clinking forks and Dorian's cheerful chatter about school. Seelan nodded and listened, trying to sound happy, but he was worried about the stack of bills on the counter. Later that night, after Dorian went to bed, Kalen sat at the table looking at those bills. He had a part-time job as a server at a diner, but it barely paid for food and rent, let alone his mom's medical expenses. Plus, he was also studying to become a lawyer in law school. It was hard because some people there didn't think he belonged. They gave him weird looks, made rude comments, or ignored him. But Kalen wanted to prove them wrong. He dreamed of becoming a lawyer and helping families like his own. As he sat there, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his coworker, Jordan. "Hey man, are you coming to that fundraiser I told you about? It's this Saturday. Free food and drinks. Good for networking," Jordan wrote. Seelan rolled his eyes. Networking wasn't his priority right now, he replied. "Not sure, man. I've got a lot going on." Jordan replied quickly, "You should come. Trust me, it could open doors for you." Seelan didn't reply. He didn't see how going to a fancy event with rich people could help him. He didn't belong there. The next day during dinner, Dorian brought it up. "You should go, Seelan," Dorian said excitedly. "You always say connections are important for becoming a lawyer. This could be your chance." "I don't even have anything to wear," Seelan muttered. "I'll help," Marceline said, her voice stronger than usual. "You've worked so hard for this family. If this event can help, you should go." Keelan looked at his mom and nodded. "Okay," he said quietly. That night, Seelan borrowed a suit from their neighbor, an older man who used to work in sales. The suit didn't fit perfectly, but it was good enough. Seelan wasn't going to let pride stop him. On Saturday evening, Seelan stood outside a giant mansion. The gates were tall and the lawns were neatly trimmed. Fancy cars lined the driveway, shining under the sunset. Seelan felt nervous. He adjusted the borrowed suit and walked in. Inside, the mansion was huge. Chandeliers sparkled on the ceiling, and people in fancy clothes were talking and laughing. Seelan felt out of place. He spotted a group of people near the bar, talking about politics and vacations in Europe. He felt even more uncomfortable. Suddenly, a kind voice spoke to him. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," the woman said. Kalen turned to see an older woman with silver hair and a shiny blue dress. She smiled at him kindly and held a cane in one hand. "I'm Serafina Walker," she said, holding out her hand. Seelan shook her hand. "Kalen Carter, nice to meet you." Serafina tilted her head and smiled. "You're not used to events like this, are you?" "No, ma'am," Seelan admitted. "A coworker said it might be good for networking." That's smart, Serafina said, but it can be easy to feel lost in these big crowds. Why don't we sit down and talk? Serafina led Celan to a quiet corner with two chairs. He felt a little better as they sat down. So, Celan, Serafina said, why are you here? Really? I think there's more to your story. At first, Celan didn't know how much to say, but Serafina seemed kind and understanding. He told her about his mom's illness, his brother, and how hard things had been since his dad passed away. He also told her about law school and how he wanted to make life better for his family. Serafina listened carefully. That's a lot to handle, she said gently, but it sounds like you're doing an amazing job, even when it's hard. Celan shrugged. I don't have a choice. If I don't do it, no one else will. Serafina smiled. That kind of determination is rare, Celan. You're stronger than you think. They talked for a long time. Celan even told her about the challenges he faced at law school, like being treated unfairly because of his race. Serafina nodded. I understand what it's like to feel out of place, she said, but don't let that stop you. The world needs people like you who are brave enough to fight for what's right. Celan felt like Serafina really understood him. For the first time, he didn't feel so invisible. Serafina told Celan about her own life. She said her late husband was a kind man who believed in helping others. After he died, she continued his work, focusing on helping people who needed it most. I've met so many smart and amazing people, Serafina said, her eyes looking far away for a moment. But not everyone gets the chances they deserve. That's why I do what I do, to help make things fair, even just a little bit. Celan nodded, feeling moved by her words. He never thought he'd find someone like Serafina who understood him. As the evening ended, Serafina put a hand on his arm. Celan, it's been so nice talking to you, she said warmly. I hope we meet again. I'd like that too, Celan said, surprised by how much he meant it. Serafina smiled kindly. Take care of yourself, Celan, and remember, you're stronger than you think. When Celan left her big, fancy house that night, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Their meeting felt important, like it wasn't just a random event. For the first time in a long while, Celan felt a little hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to get better. The next morning, sunlight peeked through the cracked blinds in Celan's small apartment. It woke him up earlier than he wanted. He groaned, feeling tired. His body still ached from working, studying, and thinking about Serafina's words. Her words had stuck with him. She believed in him in a way that made him feel strange but good. Nobody ever believed in him like that, especially not a stranger. As Celan stretched and walked into the tiny kitchen, his phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up and saw a number he didn't know. He hesitated but answered. Hello? Hello, Celan. This is Serafina Walker, came the calm, familiar voice. Celan blinked in surprise. He didn't think he'd ever hear from her again. Good morning, Mrs. Walker, he said. I didn't expect you to call. Serafina chuckled softly. I hope you don't mind. I enjoyed our talk last night and couldn't stop thinking about what you said. Are you free to meet today? There's something I'd like to discuss. Celan hesitated, his mind racing with questions. Why would someone like her want to meet him again? Sure, I can be free, he said carefully. Where should I go? My home, Serafina said kindly but firmly. I'll send my driver to pick you up. Does 2 work? Yeah, that works. Great. See you then, Serafina said and hung up before Celan could ask more questions. He stared at his phone, his stomach twisting with nerves. What could she want to talk about? At 2 sharp, a shiny black car stopped in front of his apartment. A man in a suit stepped out and opened the door for Celan. As the car drove through the city, Celan felt out of place. The ride was so smooth and fancy, nothing like the bumpy bus rides he was used to. When they reached Serafina's house, Celan was amazed again by how huge it was. The tall gates and big green lawns looked even more impressive, but also a little scary. The driver walked Celan to the front door, where a butler greeted him and took him inside. Serafina was waiting in a sunny room, sitting in a soft chair. A tray of tea and tiny cakes was on the table. She smiled warmly when Seelan walked in. "Kaelin, I'm so glad you came. Please have a seat." "Thank you for inviting me," Seelan said politely as he sat across from her. They talked for a while. Serafina asked about his family, school, and job. She listened closely, like she really cared. But Kaelin could tell there was something else she wanted to say. Finally, Serafina put down her teacup and looked serious. "Seelan, I want to tell you something personal. It's important, and I think you'll understand why I'm sharing it with you." Kaelin leaned forward, curious. "I wasn't always the person you see today," she began softly. "A long time ago, I only cared about money and power. I didn't think about people who had less than me. But then one night, everything changed." Seelan listened closely. "I was walking home late when a man tried to rob me. He had a knife, and I was so scared I couldn't move. Then a young man came out of nowhere and saved me. He fought off the attacker and stayed with me until I was safe. I never even got his name." Serafina's eyes grew distant. "That moment opened my eyes. It made me see how unfair the world can be. After that, I decided to use my money and power to help others, especially people who've been left behind." Kaelin was amazed by her story. "That's incredible," he said quietly. Serafina smiled gently. "Thank you. That's why I brought you here today. You remind me of that young man who saved me. Strong, brave, and kind. The world needs more people like you." Kaelin felt his face grow hot. "I'm just trying to get by," he said, feeling shy. "And yet you do it with strength and dignity," Serafina replied. "That's why I want to make you an offer." She paused, her face becoming serious. "Kaelin, I'm dying," she said softly. "I have a disease, and the doctors say I have less than a year to live." Kaelin's breath caught. He had noticed she seemed a little weak but hadn't expected this. I'm so sorry," he said. Serafina waved her hand gently. "Don't be. I've made peace with it. But before I go, I want to make sure my work continues. My foundation, my resources, they need someone who can lead with honesty and vision. I believe that person is you." Kaelin stared at her, shocked. "I don't understand. What are you asking me to do?" Serafina looked him in the eye. "Kaelin, I want you to marry me." Seelan froze, sure he had misheard. "Marry you?" "Yes," she said calmly. "Not for love or tradition, but as a partnership. If you marry me, I can legally give you control of everything I own, my estate and my foundation. It's the simplest way." Seelan's mind spun. It sounded crazy. "Mrs. Walker, I don't think I can do that." "I understand," Serafina said gently, "but think about what it could mean. Your mom could get the care she needs, your brother could go to a good school, and you could help so many people with the resources I'd give you." Kaelin felt the weight of her words. It could save his family, but it felt so strange and wrong. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Serafina said with a kind nod. "Take all the time you need. But remember, Keelan, chances like this don't come often. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the biggest changes." Kaelin left her house feeling confused and overwhelmed. What should he do? That night, Seelan sat with his mom, Marceline, at their small kitchen table. She noticed he seemed worried. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked softly. Seelan hesitated, then told her everything about Serafina's offer, her illness, and what it could mean for their family. When he finished, Marceline was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Kaelin, that's a big decision, but you've carried this family for so long, cried. Maybe this isn't about right or wrong. Maybe it's about what you can do with this chance." Seelan was surprised. "You think I should do it?" Marceline took his hand and looked him in the eye. "I think you're a good man, and sometimes good men have to make hard choices for the people they love." Her words stayed with Seelan as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. What should he do? Kaelin thought about his mom. She always tried to act strong even when she wasn't, that because she didn't want him to worry. Then he thought about himself. He had spent so much time trying to survive that he forgot what it felt like to have hope. 2 days later, Kalen stood outside Serafina's big house again. His heart was beating fast as he rang the doorbell. The same butler as before led him to a sunny room where Serafina was waiting. She smiled warmly, but looked closely at his face, like she was trying to figure something out. "Salen," she said, pointing to a chair. "I didn't think I'd see you again so soon." "I've been thinking," Kalen said, sitting down. "About my offer?" Serafina asked, her voice calm but curious. Kalen took a deep breath and gripped the chair tightly. "I'll do it. I'll marry you." Serafina's smile became softer, and for a moment, Selen thought she looked relieved. "You've made a brave choice, Kalen," she said. "I promise you won't regret it." The next few days were very busy. Serafina quickly made plans for a private wedding. Only a few people were invited. Seelan signed a bunch of papers, feeling like he was just watching everything happen instead of being a part of it. When he tried on his suit, he avoided looking in the mirror because he couldn't believe the choices he was making. The wedding day came quietly. It was held in a small chapel on Serafina's estate. The guests included Serafina's lawyer, a few of her staff, Kalen's mom, and his brother, Dorian. Seelan's mom, Marceline, wore her best church dress and smiled at him kindly as he walked down the aisle. Dorian looked a bit confused but amazed by how fancy everything was. Serafina stood at the altar in a navy blue dress that was both simple and elegant. She lightly held her cane and stood tall, looking proud. When Seelan stood next to her, she gave him a calm and steady look. The ceremony was short and formal. The person leading it spoke softly, and when Seelan said, "I do," his voice shook a little, but he made himself look into Serafina's eyes, finding strength in her steady gaze. When it was over, the small group clapped politely. Serafina gently put her hand on Seelan's arm. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion he couldn't quite understand. After the ceremony, there was a small party in the dining room of Serafina's house. Kalen sat with his mom and brother, feeling like everything that had just happened wasn't real. Serafina walked around the room, talking to her guests, always calm and in control. Later that evening, Serafina asked Seelan to meet her in her study. The room was grand, with tall bookshelves and a big wooden desk. She asked him to sit across from her. "Now that we're officially partners," she said, "there are a few things I want to talk about." Seelan nodded, unsure of what she was about to say. "First," Serafina began, "I want you to learn about the foundation I've built. It's the most important thing I've done in my life, and I want you to understand its mission and the impact it has. You'll meet the team and visit some of the projects we support." Seelan listened carefully, surprised that Serafina was serious about him helping her. She didn't treat him like someone who was just there for show. She wanted him to take on real responsibilities. "Second," Serafina continued, her voice softening, "I want you to feel at home here. This estate is as much yours now as it is mine. I know this arrangement is unusual, but I hope you'll see it as a partnership, not just a duty." Salen didn't know what to say. The weight of what he had agreed to was finally hitting him. But as he looked at Serafina, this strong and kind woman who trusted him with her life's work, he felt a tiny spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. "I'll do my best," he said finally, his voice steady. Serafina smiled. "That's all I ask." That night, Kalen couldn't sleep. He lay in the huge, fancy bed in his new room, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem like a dead end. It felt uncertain, but maybe, just maybe, it could also be hopeful. The next morning, sunlight filled the big mansion, making the gardens outside look golden and beautiful. Inside, Kalen sat at the breakfast table, staring at a steaming cup of coffee. It had been 2 days since the wedding, and everything still felt strange. Serafina walked in with her usual quiet grace, leaning on her cane. Even though she seemed frail, she had a way of making the whole room feel full of energy. "Good morning, Salem," she said, sitting across from him. "Good morning, Mrs. Walker," Salem replied quickly, then corrected himself. "I mean, Serafina." She smiled faintly. "You'll get used to it. How are you settling in?" Kalen hesitated. "It's a lot to take in. This place feels like a whole different world." Serafina chuckled softly. "It must feel that way, but you'll find your place here soon enough." She nodded toward his untouched plate. "Eat, Seelan. You'll need your energy today. We're going to visit one of the Foundation's projects." Seelan blinked, surprised. "Already? I thought I'd have more time to get ready." "There's no better way to learn than by doing," Serafina said, "and I want you to see what this work means to people." Later that morning, they rode in a sleek black car with Serafina's assistant, Aurelia. As they drove, Serafina explained that they were visiting a community center her foundation had helped build. "It's one of our oldest projects," she said. "We offer after-school programs, job training, and other support. It's made a big difference for the families there." When they arrived, Seelan was amazed by how lively the place was. Kids played basketball outside, while adults attended workshops inside. The walls were covered in colorful paintings that celebrated the history and culture of the neighborhood. Serafina introduced Kaylin to the staff and volunteers. They all smiled warmly at her and seemed to respect her a lot. Kaylin watched as Serafina talked with the kids, her serious look softening into a warm smile. One of the center's coordinators, a woman named Isolde, pulled Kaylin aside. "She's amazing," Isolde said, nodding toward Serafina. "This center wouldn't be here without her. She doesn't just give money, she makes sure we have what we need." Salem nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and responsibility. It was clear that Serafina's work had changed lives, and now she was trusting him to carry it on. That evening, back at the estate, Seelan joined Serafina in her study. She poured them both cups of tea. "You were quiet today," she said, handing him a cup. "What did you think of the center?" "It was amazing," Kalen said. "I didn't realize how much of an impact the foundation has. Seeing it in person made it real." Serafina nodded. "That's why I wanted you to come. Numbers and reports can only tell you so much. The real impact is in the lives we touch." Her words stayed in Seelan's mind. After a moment, he asked, "Why me? You could have picked anyone, someone more experienced or qualified. Why did you choose me?" Serafina looked at him, her eyes calm but piercing. "Because you remind me of someone I used to know," she said. "Someone who saw the world not as it is, but as it could be. You have the heart and strength to make a difference, and you understand struggles that others can't imagine." Seelan swallowed hard. Her words were both comforting and overwhelming. "What if I fail?" he asked quietly. Serafina reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "We all fail sometimes," she said. "But failure isn't the end. It's part of the journey. What matters is that you keep going." Over the next few days, Kaylin joined Serafina on more visits to the Foundation's projects. They went to a women's shelter where survivors of abuse shared their stories. They attended a ceremony for students who had received scholarships thanks to the Foundation. Each visit showed Seelan how much Serafina's work had changed people's lives. But as the week went on, Seelan noticed Serafina growing weaker. She leaned more heavily on her cane and her hands trembled, but she never complained. She kept working, determined to make the most of her time. On the seventh day, Serafina called Seelan to her study. She sat at her desk, looking pale but sharp as ever. "Seelan," she said, her voice steady, "there's something I need you to read." She slid an envelope across the desk to him. His name was written on it in elegant handwriting. "This is for you," she said. "It has everything you need to know about what comes next." Seelan looked at the envelope in his hands. It felt heavy, even though it was small. "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. Serafina gave him a gentle smile. "You'll understand when you read it. Just promise me one thing. No matter what happens, keep this work going. Seelan swallowed hard. I promise, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. That night, Serafina passed away peacefully in her sleep. Seelan sat in his room, holding the envelope tightly. He felt so sad, not just because Serafina was gone, but because she had been such an important part of his life, even for a short time. When he opened the envelope, he found a letter written in Serafina's neat handwriting. As he read it, he could almost hear her voice saying each word. By the time he finished, tears rolled down his face, but he also felt something new inside, a strong feeling to carry on her work. The mansion was very quiet after Serafina Walker passed away. The staff worked quietly, their voices low as they went about their tasks. For Kalen Carter, the quietness was hard. It reminded him every moment that Serafina, the woman who had changed his life, was no longer there. The letter Serafina had written stayed on Kalen's desk. He had read it so many times, he almost knew the words by heart. Each time he understood more about what Serafina wanted him to do and how much she believed in him. Kalen, the letter began, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. But I still believe in you. I chose you to continue my work because I saw the good in you, your kindness, your strength, and your courage to stand up for what's right. In the letter, Serafina told Seelan about her life. She grew up very rich and didn't understand how hard life was for many people. But one day, a stranger risked everything to help her. That moment changed her forever. She saw how unfair the world could be and spent her life trying to help make it better. I worked hard to make a difference, Serafina wrote, but real change takes many people, not just one. Now it's your turn to carry on the work I started. At the end of the letter, she included a key and instructions. Kalen held the key in his hand. It was small and fancy, with a tag that said, Office Vault. The instructions told him to go to Serafina's private study and open a safe. Inside, she had left important papers about the foundation and its projects. That afternoon, Kalen went to the study. The room looked the same as the last time he and Serafina had sat there. Sunlight came through the tall windows, and the room smelled like polished wood. He walked to the big wooden desk and found the safe under it, just like Serafina had described. The key fit perfectly. With a quiet click, the safe opened. Inside, Kalen saw neatly arranged binders, envelopes, and a leather journal. He picked up the journal first and opened it to the first page. It was filled with Serafina's handwriting, every word carefully written. This work is bigger than any one person, she had written. It's about giving people a chance, especially those who have never had one. It's about breaking the cycle of unfairness that keeps some families trapped in poverty for generations. If you are reading this, Kalen, it means I believe you can carry this forward. The journal had notes about everything. The foundation's early struggles, its successes, and Serafina's thoughts on what needed to be done next. Kalen's throat tightened as he read her words. He could feel her passion and determination in every sentence. Beneath the journal, he found a thick folder labeled Immediate Actions. Inside were instructions for ongoing projects, with details about budgets, contacts, and schedules. There were also handwritten notes for different people in the foundation, each one meant to guide them in their jobs. As Kalen looked through everything, his confidence grew. Serafina didn't choose him just to stand in her place. She truly believed he could lead. He promised himself he wouldn't let her down. The next morning, Kalen called a meeting with the senior staff of the foundation. They gathered in the big conference room of the mansion. Most of them didn't know Seelan well and looked unsure about him leading. He could tell they had doubts. Kalen began the meeting by reading Serafina's letter out loud. Her words filled the room. She believed in all of us, Kalen said, his voice strong. And I will do everything I can to honor that belief. I promise to lead with honesty and to listen to all of you. By the time the meeting ended, the mood had shifted. Some people still looked unsure, but others seemed hopeful. They could see that Seelan was serious about continuing Serafina's work. In the weeks that followed, Kalen worked harder than ever. He met with each department leader to learn about their work and the challenges they faced. He visited projects to see how they helped people and listened to their stories. Every visit reminded him why this work was so important. But it wasn't easy. Some staff members doubted him because he was young and inexperienced. Others didn't think he could handle the job. Donors and partners also questioned if he was the right person to lead. At one meeting, a big donor spoke up. "Balthazar Adams," they said sharply, "do you really think you're ready for this? Serafina was amazing. You have big shoes to fill." Seelan felt frustrated but stayed calm. "I understand your concerns," he said. "I won't pretend to be Serafina. No one can replace her. But this isn't about me, Utes. It's about the people this foundation helps. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I can do this." The room went quiet. The donor nodded, though they still looked unsure. It wasn't a big win, but it was a start. That night, Seelan returned to the study. He opened Serafina's journal and read her thoughts about overcoming challenges. She had faced doubts and tough times too, but she never gave up. Her words gave Seelan new strength. As he looked around the study, his eyes fell on a framed photo on the bookshelf. It was a picture of Serafina when she was younger, standing with a group of children at a school. She was smiling brightly, her eyes full of purpose. Kalen picked up the photo and held it close. "I won't let you down," he said quietly. "I promise." The first big problem Kalen had to face came from the people in charge of the foundation, called the Board of Directors. Serafina, the kind woman who used to run the foundation, had left Kalen in charge before she passed away. But not everyone thought it was a good idea. At a meeting, some of the board members looked at Seelan with worried faces. Balthazar Adams, one of the older members, spoke up. "We all respected Serafina, but we're not sure about her decision to leave the foundation to you. You're young and don't have much experience. Why do you think you can run such a big organization?" Seelan took a deep breath and gripped the table. He knew they would ask something like this, but it still hurt to hear. "You're right," he said firmly but politely. "I am young, and I don't have as much experience as others, but I have something just as important. I'm determined to continue Serafina's mission. She believed in me, and I'm here to show that her trust wasn't misplaced." Another board member, Miss Eulalia Grayson, leaned forward. "How exactly do you plan to do that, Seelan? This job is about more than just passion. It's about getting real results." Seelan nodded and looked right at her. "I've been studying Serafina's plans and all the projects the foundation is working on. My goal is to help more people, especially those in communities that need us most. I might not know everything yet, but I promise to work as hard as I can to figure it out." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Eulalia gave a small nod. "We'll hold you to that," she said. Even though it was hard at first, Kellen began to get better at his job. He started with small tasks, learning as he went, and then took on bigger challenges. He visited the foundation's projects like shelters and schools to see how they were helping people. Being there made him feel how important the work was, and it gave him the energy to keep going. One day, Seelan visited a school in a neighborhood where the foundation had helped with new books, computers, and after-school programs. He wanted to see how things were going. As he walked through the school, he could see how happy the teachers and students were. They told him how much the support had changed their school for the better. In one classroom, a little girl walked up to him with a notebook in her hands. "Are you the man who helped our school?" she asked, her eyes wide. Kalen knelt down and smiled. "I'm part of the team that helped," he said, "but it's your teachers and principal who make the real difference." The girl smiled back, her face lighting up. "I want to be a lawyer someday." Seelan felt a lump in his throat. "You can be anything you want to be," he said, his voice soft. Just keep working hard and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That moment gave Kalen a new sense of purpose. It reminded him why the Foundation's work was so important. Not every day was like that, though. Some people doubted Seelan because he was young, and others judged him because of where he came from. At a fancy fundraising event, one rich donor told him, "This is a big job for someone like you. Are you sure you can handle it?" Seelan kept calm, even though he felt upset. "Ambition is what makes progress possible," he said. Serafina believed anyone could make a difference, no matter where they came from. I believe that too. The donor shrugged and walked away, but moments like this only made Kalen work harder. He knew he had to prove himself, not just for the board members, but for the people the foundation was helping. At night, Seelan often sat in Serafina's study, reading her journals. Her words comforted him, especially when things got tough. In one of her journals, Serafina had written, "Change isn't easy. People who fight for it will face resistance. But the only way forward is to keep going, even when it's hard." Those words became Kalen's motto. After a month, Kalen started to see the results of his work. The foundation's projects were doing better, and some of the people who doubted him were beginning to change their minds. At a meeting, Eulalia Grayson came up to him and smiled. "You've surprised me, Kalen," she said. "I didn't think you could do it, but you're proving me wrong." "Thank you, Eulalia," Seelan said, his smile showing how much her words meant to him. One day, Seelan stood at a community center. It was the opening of a new training wing, a place where people could learn skills to get better jobs. He felt nervous as he prepared to speak to the crowd, but this day was too important to hide. "Thank you all for being here," Seelan said when it was his turn to speak. "This isn't just about opening a building. It's about giving people a chance to create better lives for themselves and their families. Serafina Walker believed in helping people, and I'm honored to continue her work." The crowd clapped, and Seelan felt proud. After the event, a young man came up to him. "Balthazar Adams, thank you. This center is going to change everything for me and my family." "That's why we're here," Seelan said, "to give people a second chance." That night, Seelan sat in Serafina's study again, reading her journal. Her words reminded him that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about caring for others and never giving up. He promised himself to keep fighting for the Foundation's mission, no matter how hard it got. Together, through Serafina's memory and his own determination, they would keep building a better future for everyone. Thank you for watching. If you like this story and want to see more, please subscribe to our channel. That way, you won't miss any new videos. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and share what you think in the comments. We love hearing your thoughts. Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on our channel. We'll see you in the next story.